Whether the team has given us the the highest of highs or the bluest of blues, we'll cover it all here. On Commanders Nightly News, I, of course, am your host, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. Let's get to tonight's lead story. So tonight is the season finale of Commanders Nightly News, and what a season it's been. You guys have been outstanding from week 1, episode 1.1, all the way here to 19.2. Wish we were talking about preparing for a playoff game this Saturday or Sunday. However, we're talking about an offensive coordinator change, and we will dive into that deep tonight. I told you guys that I would have a list for you of 7 candidates that Washington will probably consider when making a decision. I will have that for you a little bit later on as a man of my word later on in the show. However, I did want to start out tonight's show kind of overanalyzing the decision that was made and the consequences that come from this decision and some of the pitfalls that Washington may run into searching for a new offensive coordinator. So when the decision was first made, we were all excited and I was overjoyed. I mean, at the end of the day, there's certain things that I know we aren't going to get this offseason. Ron Rivera isn't going anywhere. And you can say what you want about him. I'm not thrilled that he's going to be here another year, but we can do a hell of a lot worse. And I didn't think he was the biggest problem holding this team back. I've already said how I feel about Ron Rivera. I think he's done all that he can really do in terms of getting this team from being the laughingstock of the NFL off the field to a respected outfit that has a guy in front leading it that you respect, which is what Ron Rivera has brought to the table. He's brought a bunch of guys here who are workers, who represent this organization in the right way, like Jonathan Allen. Again, Allen was here already. Terry McLaurin was here already. A lot of the leaders of this team and the guys that we think have a chance to be really good football players, they were here before Ron got here. Now, there have been some guys that have been added, i.e. Jahan Dotson and, Cam Curl. And again, Curl, you could argue, again, Ron was here, but that was more so a draft pick of sort of the last regime. It was like kind of a melding of the two regimes, if you will, because of Kyle Smith being here. And I think he was more in control of that draft than Ron really was, but that's nor here nor there. Obviously Derek Forrest, there are some guys, Benjamin St. Juste, that we think are going to be cornerstones potentially of this team if they can stay healthy and continue to do some of the things that we've seen them do in their brief period of time being in the NFL here with the Commanders. That said, I feel like in order for Ron to maximize his roster, he's going to need someone who has the ability to do that for him. He's not going to be able to do that. And the scary part of hiring this next offensive coordinator is Jay Gruden was on the radio pretty much after Ron Rivera had made the decision to move on from Scott Turner. And one of the things he spoke about was it's tough to hire a general manager an offensive coordinator, or really any coach in particular, in a lame duck year, essentially, which is what Ron Rivera most likely and company are going to be going into with new ownership coming in. We'll talk about that in a second. But he also said it's even more challenging to hire someone when you're being told what we want you to do. When you're as a coordinator, you want that position as play caller because you want the freedom to be able to call whatever you believe is the best possible, play call to get the intended results and maximize the playmakers that you may have on your roster. And when Martin Mayhew and Ron Rivera sit at a press conference after the season, right before firing their previous play caller, and they say with a straight face, we want to be a 2-to-1 run to pass ratio offense in 2023, who's really trying to sign up for that? None of these young boys out here, none of these young 37, 34-year-old coordinators are trying to hear that shit. because that's Stone Age football. We're not in that age of, 3 yards in a cloud of dust anymore. Things have changed for the better. Okay. Offenses are more dynamic, they're more unique, they have different, reads and keys, and we're still looking to bludgeon people to death with the run game and take the ball out of the quarterback's hands. And I don't know if anybody wants to sign up for that. Okay. So, something that I didn't entertain when the move was just made, because in my mind as a fan, objectively looking at it, but at that time I was not being objective. I was in my fan mind, and the fan mind said, I've watched this team. I know this team front and back. I know what we have, what we possess. I know what this can be. Someone's going to be elated to get their hands on these kinds of weapons. Someone might be tempted to say, you know what, Sam Howell, I can work with that kid. You give me Terry McLaurin, you give me Curtis Samuel, you give me Jahan Dotson, you give me Antonio Gibson, you give me Brian Robinson, you give me all these tight ends. I could do something with this offense. In my fan mind, that's what I'm saying. In the moment when Scott Turner is fired, someone's going to be salivating to take this job. What I didn't consider in my fan mind right after the decision was made to fire Scott Turner was, hey, Ron's going into a lame duck year. There's an ownership change. Someone could be uprooting their family for 1 year only to be fired the next year and be looking for work again. Are you willing to leave a stable situation wherever you may be for the opportunity to potentially rise up the ranks? Okay, this league is all about upward mobility. All right. There are a few coaches, a very small percentage, that are perfectly content with being positional coaches. Their window for growth and improving their status within league circles has come and gone, and they're perfectly comfortable being on someone's staff as a teacher, offensive line coach, D-line coach, linebackers coach. They're perfectly fine. They're not looking to rise up the ranks. They just want to be a part of a staff. They're football lifers. This is what they want to do. And they'll always keep work, whether it's with this staff or if they jump on with another staff after this staff is no longer here, whatever the case may be. But for the most part, there's a lot of young, hungry coaches in the NFL. Guys that came out of school as players or as a graduate assistants, and they went straight into coaching ranks, and they want to move up, and they're dying for an opportunity. And they know that there are only 32 of any given one of these opportunities: offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, head coach. There are only 32 of these. Okay. You can make up all the positional names you want: offensive quality control assistant, offensive head coach. If I want to give my boy a job, he just got canned, and I want to give him, he's the assistant head coach, man. Come over here with me. He's not the offensive coordinator. He's not the defensive coordinator. There's only 32 of those. And if you're a quarterback's coach, you're a running back's coach, you're an offensive assistant, and you want an opportunity to get your name out there, to get another chance. Let's say you've been a head coach, you failed, you've got knocked down 2 or 3 rungs. You once were that guy. Now you're a quarterback's coach. You're dying to get back into a play calling role so that you can prove to everyone that I deserve another opportunity. Then maybe a 1-year stint somewhere is worth the risk to get your name back out there percolating and circulating, maybe just to see if you can't find a way to hit it big, strike gold, and all of a sudden your name is resonating when one of these coaching cycles come up. That's what Washington has to hope, essentially, for. That someone's willing to roll the dice in order for an opportunity to have their name circulating once again. Because if I am a coach, a young coach, or a coach with a bright future, or a coach that is comfortable, if I'm one of those 3 things, I'm comfortable, I got a bright future, or I got a good gig, and I might as well just stay here, because the path to me getting a head coaching job or that upward mobility that I'm talking about, it's best served here, not going to a place where I could be fired after a year. If one of those things applies to you, then this job probably isn't for you. This job here in Washington is for the guy that's looking for another opportunity, and he'll do whatever it takes to get it. And that includes taking a job that he knows the risks, the rules, and the parameters, that he could be here for 12 months and potentially be fired with new ownership. He's well aware of this, and he's willing to take that risk for the opportunity to taste what it's like to have the power of being called head coach again in this league. You got to get a guy that's desperate to prove that I can do this. Yep, I'm in a situation that's cool, but I know I'm capable. And in order to prove that to people, I'm going to take a job that doesn't necessarily seem all that appealing. And I'm going to show you I'm capable, and I'm going to get my name out there. You got to get one of those types of candidates, either a young, hungry guy that is willing to take on that risk, or you got to get an old, cagey, wily vet that says, I want another shot. Here's my opportunity to get that shot. Washington is in a box because Ron Rivera is on borrowed time. Without a massive winning season next year, he's going to be fired. All right. The contradiction from Ronald's mouth has been startling because on one hand, on numerous occasions, we've sat here and talked about Ron talking about wins and losses, and that's what's most important. That's what I'm going to be judged on, Ron said. I'm going to be judged on wins and losses. That's what's important. The interesting stuff is what happens with ownership and Dan Snyder. Important stuff is wins and losses. That's what I'm going to be judged on. But then we get to the end of the season and we're asking you, is this a successful season? And you're telling me that everything's not about wins and losses. Well, which is it, Ron? Can't be both. You can't have your cake and eat it too. He's going to be judged on wins and losses next year. And if there's not more than 9 wins next season, because I don't think 9's enough unless 9 gets you into the show. Unless there's more than 9 wins and you're a playoff team, he will be fired because of the wins that he says aren't important. So is an offensive coordinator willing to come here, take that risk, knowing that there is a likelihood, a great likelihood, probably more likely that you'll be fired next year than you'll be back thriving in Washington? Are you willing to take on that challenge? I didn't consider that. The fan mind didn't let me. But the objective, take a step back mind after that was introduced to me said, well, goddamn, I didn't even think about that. There are challenges in filling this role for Washington. And on top of the challenge of already just saying, hey, might not be around for 2 or 3 years here. This might be a one and done type of gig. And you might be looking for work after next year. This time next year, you may be out on the streets looking for work. On top of that, you've got an organization that is hell-bent on running a football against all odds and against the grain. The rest of the league is saying, hey, it's cool to run it, and running can help you, especially this late in the season and when it gets cold outside, that physicality, all of that stuff. Yeah. But the rest of the league has made it abundantly clear, if you want to win consistently in this league, you better be able to throw the football. We can go around the league and look at all the top teams. There's one common thread. Not everybody's got an elite passing, game, and not everybody's got an elite quarterback. But they've got the ability to throw the football if they need to. The Buffaloes, the Kansas Cities, the Cincinnatis of the world. Hell, you even look at the Eagles. The Eagles run the football a lot with Hurts and the running backs. But guess what? A.J. Brown has over 1,400 yards receiving this season. Devontae Smith has over 1,000 yards receiving this season. Understand that the Eagles are throwing the football. Understand that the Cowboys are throwing the football. Understand that the Buccaneers are throwing the football. The 49ers are protecting Brock Purdy. But guess what? When they need to throw it, like they did in week 17 against the Vegas Raiders, when they needed to score damn near 40 to win, guess what they did? They threw the football. You've got to have that ability in this league. You think you're going to keep winning games 17-16 and 20-17 and 20-19? You think you're going to keep winning games in that fashion? Good luck. Because you've got to damn near be perfect to win games in that fashion week after week after week after week. Wanting to control time of possession, that's cool. But if you miss a field goal or you have a penalty and then you end up having to be on the fringe of field goal range and you don't know if you should punt it, it's too long to go for it. It's 4th and 13. Want to kick a field goal, but my kicker's just missed. Do I really want to send him out there again? Well, you just wasted 8 minutes of the clock and you got nothing to show for it. Like that first Giants game where you had 2 separate drives in the second half, one spanning 8 minutes, the other 6 minutes, and you came away with nothing on either drive. That's loser football. And the mindset of this staff is stuck in the 80s and 90s. So on top of the fact that this is a lame duck type of job, you've got guys with the mentality of an 80s, 90s coach here in Washington. General manager stuck in the 80s and 90s, head coach, which is why you surround yourself with people who are like-minded. Jack Del Rio is stuck in the 80s and 90s. All of these guys. Del Rio is probably a little bit more progressive. Okay. I think he's a little bit more progressive. But he also has his tendencies as well. At the end of the day, that's another challenge facing whomever may take this job, or even the thought of trying to get someone here to take the job. So for as excited as we are about Scott Turner's departure, I don't know who the hell we're going to get to come here that's going to make us feel really good about moving on from Scott Turner. Look, I'd much rather see what the grass looks like on the other side than just keep rolling with Scott Turner. Look, same thing I said with Daniel Snyder. I don't know if the next ownership group or owner is going to be any better than Dan. He can't be any worse. Now, we can't say that for offensive coordinator because while Scott Turner had a lot of shit about him, you can do worse than Scott Turner. Trust me. But you can also do a hell of a lot better. And I'm willing to take that shot. Just know that there are challenges that this team faces in trying to fill that vacancy because of the circumstances surrounding the position, the group that's currently here, what's about to happen with this organization in terms of an ownership change, and then the philosophical belief, which I talked about from that presser, which was one of my bullet points, talking points on the last episode of Commander Nightly News. I said their philosophical beliefs will scare people away from wanting to come here. If I'm an offensive coordinator, I don't want to hear that run, pass shit. I don't want to hear 2-to-1 run to pass ratio. Not unless I believe in that. I think they're going to be looking for someone who believes in that kind of philosophy. So, with that said, let's move to in other news. So, I told you guys I was going to sit down. I was going to hammer out a list of 7. When I'm feeling listy, I start listing things. You know what a list is for me. It's comprised of 7 items. And I told you I was going to sit down. I was going to hammer out a list. I was going to give you some names to consider. Now, they may not consider these names, but these are names that I think they are going to consider. These are not names that I, myself, Louie T, would consider necessarily. There's some on this list that I would be very intrigued by. Absolutely. But I don't think they're going to be necessarily intrigued by some of these names. But these are some of the names I think they should be interested in. And this is my guess as to who will ultimately end up as the coordinator here. So let's start with some honorable mentions. I really came up with a list of about 11 guys, 11 to 12 guys. I narrowed it down to 11. And so the honorable mentions obviously did not make the list, but these are just names to just look out for. But I don't intend on Washington even being remotely interested. These are just names that I'm throwing out there because they make some semblance of sense for various reasons. So you start with Phil Longo, who is the offensive coordinator at UNC when Sam Howell was there. Okay. And I actually listened to a interview that John Keim did with Phil Longo after Sam Howell was drafted here in Washington. And this was a while ago. Obviously, this was last probably May. Keim got him on the podcast, and he talked about De'Ami Brown. He talked about Sam Howell, what we were getting, all of that good stuff. And I remember thinking, Phil Longo sounds like a good dude. And he ultimately took a job this past year at Wisconsin to be their offensive coordinator, where he is right now. It would make a ton of sense if you want to maximize Sam Howell. If you want to go all in, and I don't know if they're prepared to do that or not, but if you wanted to go all in on Sam Howell, what better way to do that than to go get the guy that allowed him to be in the Heisman Trophy discussion as a preseason Heisman Trophy watch list candidate in Phil Longo, guy that knows him better than anybody else in the league, and would be able to put together an offense that would benefit Sam and highlight his strengths and minimize his weaknesses the best. Keep in mind, and this is not college, but keep in mind, under Phil Longo's tutelage at UNC, there were 2,000-yard rushers in the same season, 2,000-yard receivers in the same season with Sam Howell under quarterback. Now, Phil Longo is an air raid disciple, meaning everything's out of the gun and everything is more so geared towards throwing the football. You throw to set up the run, and that's not what they want to do here, which is why I don't think he will even be considered. Really, I don't think any collegiate coach, because of the way that this organization thinks, they're not thinking outside of the box. In order to go hire a guy from the collegiate ranks, even if that guy has an NFL background, you'd have to be thinking outside the box. This group isn't thinking outside of the box. They're too old to think outside the box. They want to run, pass. So if you're thinking run, pass, you're not thinking outside the box. So I don't think Phil Longo is an option here, but it's a name to consider. But I don't think he's an option here. And air raid is probably enough to scare this group away. Air? We want to stay on the ground. Air? That's scary for them. So Cliff Kingsbury is a name that a lot of you guys threw out immediately after he was fired in Arizona, and Scott Turner a day later was fired here in Washington. And so Cliff Kingsbury is a hot name for just about every team, the Jets included, that have an offensive coordinator opening. To that, I say there's no way Cliff Kingsbury is going to be here in Washington. Again, he's an air raid disciple similar to that of Phil Longo. I don't think that his ideology fits what we want to do here in Washington. Now, I think Cliff Kingsbury gets a bad rap in terms of not wanting to run the football. He actually does run the football, but it's not all that effective all the time. That said, again, another gun run based team. Air raid, again, it is exactly what it sounds like, a lot of passing of the football. And I don't think that's the direction that they want to go in. Thus, I don't think Cliff Kingsbury will be in consideration for this job. Now, I would not rule him out 100% like I would Phil Longo, but I'd put his percentage at, being Washington's next offensive coordinator at less than 5%, probably more like 1%. It's not zero, but it's like 1% chance. Todd Monken is a name that people love to bring up, offensive coordinator for the Georgia Bulldogs, back-to-back national championship winner, took an offense that was middling, and under Kirby Smith, why am I blanking on his name? Anyway, under their new head coach, second-year head coach, rather, or I think he's third, Kirby Smart. I don't know why I called him Kirby Smith. Under Kirby Smart, in 3 years under Kirby Smart, they've won 2 national championships, and they went to a third. Okay, I think it might be 2 national championships in 3 years or 4 years, one or the other. Either way, Todd Monken is largely responsible for the resurgence of offensive football at the University of Georgia. The names have changed at receiver and tight end and running back, but the consistent part of what they've done over the last 2 years has been the quarterback. And even that was not consistent 2 years ago, or last year rather. And of course, the offensive coordinator. And he's getting a lot of attention. I surmise that if he's serious about getting a head coaching gig in college, you need to stay right where you are, because you're right on the precipice. And really, he can call his shot right now. He can wait for an opening and then call his shot and say, hey, there's an opening at a big time school. I'm ready to go. That opening probably hasn't happened yet, and he's perfectly comfortable where he is. I'm not taking a job with a NFL team where I could be fired in a year, where I'm a 2-time national championship offensive coordinator. Doesn't make any sense to me. He'd be a great fit for what we want to do. That Georgia offense looks a lot like what you would like to see in the NFL, and what you see a lot of in the NFL. They can go under center. They can go in the gun. They do a lot of different things, and I think he'd fit. And he's actually got an NFL background as Todd Monken, but I don't see him being a guy that is in play for this job. Brian Hartline, Ohio State wide receiver coach and passing game coordinator. Now, he's been a hot name, and remember, he's got NFL roots. He was a longtime NFL wide receiver. And the amount of talent that has come out of Ohio State's program at receiver, I mean, hell, we got one on our team, so we know. But you look around the league and you look at all of the talent that has come out of that program, there'll be another first-round pick more likely than not with Jackson, Smith, and Jigba this year out of that program. And you look at the 2 receivers that went 10 and 11 last season in the draft out of Ohio State, and Chris Olave, and I always forget the one that the Jets drafted. It'll come to me. But you look at all the receivers that have studied under Brian Hartline, from Terry McLaurin to Williams. What's the receiver Williams that got drafted by the Lions? Jamison Williams. He was at Ohio State before leaving to go to Alabama. There's a countless amount of these receivers in the league that went to Ohio State. They've been a factory. Curtis Samuel is on our team as well. All of these guys have studied under Brian Hartline. He's been there for a while. He's gaining a reputation of churning out these big-time, pro-ready NFL wide receivers. And I think this is a guy that's eventually going to get something noteworthy here shortly, whether it's a coordinator job or he skips a step and goes straight to being a head coach somewhere. I think he's going to be in line for a coordinator job here shortly. It'd be great if Washington was thinking outside the box, to even consider a guy like this, but I don't think they are. Again, I don't think they're going to go to the collegiate ranks to go and get him. So Garrett Wilson, thank you for that, Rich. There's so many Ohio State wide receivers. So he'd be an interesting candidate. I don't see him being considered. Again, I don't think they're going to the collegiate ranks to go get a guy. So now we go and we think about guys in the league, because honestly, that's where it's going to come from. It's going to be someone in the NFL right now. So let's narrow it down to the list, the actual list, the 7 guys that I think Washington may consider when looking at this job. And also keep in mind the philosophical approach that they want to have, which is running the football. So when I think about that, I'm thinking about guys who played in that similar era, who coached in that similar era to Ron Rivera and Martin Mayhew. And I'm also thinking about guys with running back backgrounds and, guys that can groom a young quarterback, something along those lines, okay? Or a history with Ron Rivera. That helps also. So keep in mind that these things were relayed to us. We don't know how true they are going to ultimately be, but these messages were relayed to us when Ron Rivera initially released a statement about the team moving on from Scott Turner. One of those things that we heard from Michael Haynes, one of the reporters, works for one of the TV stations. He reported that Washington would be looking for a replacement outside of the organization. Okay. What if you can't get one? What if no one's willing to leave? Not any of the candidates that you're interested in, at least. There'll be someone that's willing to take that leap of faith and say, hey, it's a risk, but it's a risk I'm willing to take. They'll be it's 32 of these jobs in the NFL. Someone will be willing to take it. I always am amazed and I laugh when people say, who's going to want that job? It's a head coaching job, for instance. We used to always say that about Washington. Who's going to want to take this job? It's only 32 of these. Somebody's going to want to take the job. Trust me. It may not be somebody that you want. It may not be a qualified candidate or someone with the credentials that suggest they should be the next head coach of your team. But guess what? Like Jim Zorn, for instance, wasn't necessarily qualified or have the credentials to be the head coach, but he ended up the coach. Somebody will take the job. Same thing with offensive coordinator. We can sit here and talk about, oh, it's a lame duck this and it. Somebody will be willing to take that leap and say, hey, it may only be 1 year potentially, but if, first of all, understand that there's a thing called athletic arrogance that I talk about that you must have to be successful at this level, whether it's a player, a coach, organizationally, GM, whatever the case may be. There is an athletic arrogance that you must have, all right, that says, man, I can do this shit. I'm better than him, or I can do this. So if I'm a offensive, head coaching assistant, or I'm a quality control assistant, or whatever the case may be, quarterbacks coach and slash assistant head coach, and I know I'm capable of calling plays and I can be successful in this league. If an opportunity presents itself and you're interested, damn right I can do that shit. Give me a year. I guarantee you I will get that offense where it needs to be. That's the mindset that most of these guys have. So trust me, there'll be someone that's willing to take the leap. However, understand that you also have to take into consideration where they're coming from, how comfortable they are in their situation, and what the future looks like for them. If you can be patient and my time is coming. This is a talented team and a staff that has been assembled here. We're going to continue to win. I'm going to get an opportunity. Then you don't need to rush and go take an opportunity somewhere and end up having to come back to where you left and not be in the same spot. Like, Eric Bieniemy, there's this rumor that Washington is interested in him and he'd be interested in leaving Kansas City for the right opportunity because he wants to show teams that I can actually call the plays myself. So there's this belief that if he doesn't get hired as a head coach this cycle, he'd be willing to take a coordinator job elsewhere to prove that he is capable of being that guy. But he's not leaving Kansas City to go to Washington. I would bet any amount of money about that. And if he did do that, he'd be foolish because there are 3 or 4 guys that are on that staff, like Greg Lewis, who's the wide receivers coach, or Matt Nagy, who's the quarterbacks coach, who would be dying to get back as offensive coordinator. Nagy was the offensive coordinator in Kansas City under Andy Reid before taking the Bears job. And then when he got fired and he went back to Kansas City, you can't just get your job back. You're not just the offensive coordinator again. Now you got to go all the way back down the totem pole and work your way up. You don't think Matt Nagy is chomping at the bit to get back as the play caller so he can prove to the league, I can be a head coach again? That wasn't a great situation. I had Mitchell Trubisky. It wasn't a great situation for me. Give me another chance. So you leave as Eric Bieniemy. You take a job in Washington. It doesn't go well. You get fired. You go back to Kansas City. You're not going to be the offensive coordinator. Now that flicker, right, that you had, a flicker of hope that you're going to be a head coach, now you're a running backs coach. Now you're an assistant head coach. They made a position for you. But you ain't getting a job now. So you got to be careful. And that's why I don't think you're going to get guys like that to come here. But anyway, I digress. Number 7 for me is Deuce Staley, assistant head coach / running backs coach for the Detroit Lions. This is a guy that I think is actually in consideration for head coaching job. So I don't necessarily know if he's going to be willing to take an offensive coordinator job. He's definitely comfortable in Detroit. I think Hard Knocks has taken a guy like him and really elevated his profile. I mean, he was already a well-respected coach in league circles already for what he's done as a player and a coach in his career. However, I think Hard Knocks really elevated his stock in league circles as to whether this guy can be elevated to a bigger role, whether it's offensive coordinator or head coach. And we've seen the job he's done with the backs in Detroit, with Jamal Williams leading the league in rush touchdowns, DeAndre Swift, turning into one of the more dynamic backs in all of football when healthy. A lot of that credit has been given to Deuce Staley. And I think he's a guy that he's never called plays. So let's get that straight. And that's part of the reason he's so low on the list at number 7 is he's never called a play in the NFL, but that doesn't mean he can't. Doesn't mean he wouldn't be capable of doing it. I don't even know if he has aspirations to do that or not. That said, a guy that has his background, wants to run the football, has that same mindset that, Ron Rivera and Martin Mayhew have. He's a guy that I think they may be interested in. And if you're Deuce Staley, you've been an assistant head coach / running backs coach for a very long time. At some point, don't you want to, spread your wings and fly away? Again, I don't think Washington's the opportunity to do that at if I'm Deuce Staley. It's too risky of a proposition for me if I'm Deuce Staley with what I've done in this league and how I've, scratched and clawed my way up to where I am now as an assistant head coach. I don't really want to go to Washington. And again, in order to get Deuce Staley away from them, you would have to, I think, give him that same title of assistant head coach / offensive coordinator is a step up from running backs coach. But that assistant head coach title is, I think, what teams like Detroit build into the title to stop other teams from poaching him away. Because you either have to give a guy a lateral move or an actual step up in title in order to even interview them. Because you can deny a team access to your assistant coaches if they're trying to hire them for a position that's lateral or, beneath the position that coach already has. So you've got to give them a title that actually gives them more power than the one that they currently have. So I think you would have to even include the assistant, which we don't currently have on our team. We don't have an assistant head coach. No one has that title attached to them. So you could theoretically give that to him as well as offensive coordinator. I don't see him coming here, but he's number 7 on the list. Number 6 on the list of candidates for me is Ken Zampese, quarterbacks coach currently here in Washington with the Commanders. Another rumor that I heard floating around, it makes sense, but I don't know how realistic it is that they want to keep the same offensive philosophy in terms of the Air Coryell type of system. Now, it doesn't have to be just like Scott Turner's. There's different variants of the Air Coryell style, but more so the verbiage. They use a lot of numbers in Coryell's system, and it's a timing rhythm based offense, that sort of thing. They may want to keep those principles intact. So that's been rumored to be a thing. If you want to keep it consistent, Ken Zampese, his dad, Ernie Zampese, came up in the Air Coryell offense, which is why Ken Zampese, part of the reason he's here, he's very familiar with what Scott Turner was doing. And so it all kind of makes sense. So if you want to stick with that, you probably are better served just promoting Ken Zampese. That said, the rumor is, and Darren Haynes reported this already, that Washington wants to hire someone from the outside, not promote from within. But my stance has been, what if you can't get any candidates that you're interested in to leave their current jobs to come take this one here in Washington? What if you end up in a similar situation like you did with Ryan Fitzpatrick or Carson Wentz, for that matter, where you swung for the fences, you wanted other guys. Hell, last offseason, you wanted Jimmy Garoppolo. Jimmy didn't want your ass, and Jimmy was hurt. But Jimmy, there was a rumor out there. I don't know how true this was, but there was a rumor. Jimmy has a no trade clause. And Jimmy said, I don't want to play for Washington. And he would have evoked his right to veto a trade to Washington, which pisses me off to no end because, bitch, you Jimmy Garoppolo. I don't want your stinking ass either. But that's nor here nor there. At the end of the day, what if you go out there and you've got a list of guys that you're interested in and they're like, hey, man, no disrespect, but I'm good. I'm going to have to respectfully decline the offer to even interview for the job. I'm good. Thanks, but no thanks. And you come to this point where you're like, shit, I mean, I don't want to just pick a guy just to be picking a guy. We might as well just give, Ken the job. That you may come to that realization that this is a tough job to fill because of the fact that people are looking at their mortality as an offensive coordinator under your umbrella. You get fired, the likelihood is they get fired. Well, new ownership means you're on borrowed time, which means by extension, I'm on borrowed time and I ain't even do shit. I just got here. So there's a lot to consider. And I think Zampese has to be a name that is considered, even though the reports are they want to fill this position, and they probably will fill it from the outside. You have to consider Ken Zampese, I believe. I think you would be doing yourself a disservice if you didn't at least consider Ken Zampese to be a candidate for this job. Number 5 on this list is Bobby Slowick, who is the San Francisco 49ers passing game coordinator. If you watched Rio's stream with Rico, Ed, and myself, that name came up multiple times, and for good reason. I mean, you look at the 49ers passing game, weren't we all gushing over the fake screen one way, fake screen the other way, George Kittle running up the seam, easy touchdown toss with nobody around? We were all drooling over that. I remember talking to my guy, Derek B., and that's all we were talking about was, did you see that play? And that was on a Thursday night against the Seahawks. So, I do the video afterwards, the Thursday night overtime, and I remember seeing that play and saying, my God, that is gorgeous. That is delicious right there. And Derek B was like, see, I see shit like that, and then I think about what we're doing over here, and it pisses me off. And so I can't help but think, and look, we played against the 49ers. How many guys were wide open against us? Bobby Slowick is a part of that, So I can't help but look at what has been able, and he's a young guy, and this is why I don't think he's going to get the job, which is why he's so low on the list. He's a young guy. He's more innovative, thinking outside the box. Again, I don't think our guys are in that realm of thinking, right? So I don't think he's going to get the job, but he's a name that I think needs to be mentioned. He's in a good spot, though. If I'm Bobby Slowick and I'm in San Francisco, here's the problem, and this is why I think you can poach a guy like a Bobby Slowick, because their head coach is Mike Shanahan's son, Kyle Shanahan, right? Kyle Shanahan and most offensive-minded coaches don't want to relinquish play calling duties. That's fun for them. That's a fun part of the job, is calling plays. That's what got them the job, and they enjoy doing that. Some guys will get a job, and Kyle Shanahan is one of them. Sean McVay was another one of these guys, and there are a lot of them in the league. They hire a defensive coordinator, and they just let that guy take over the defense. They're not really concerned with that. When the offense comes off the field, they turn their back to the field. They're sitting down, they're looking at the tablet with the quarterback, and they're talking about ways to attack the defense. Hey, did you see this? What are you seeing out there? So that he can get a better understanding of what plays need to be called. They don't give a shit about defense. Obviously, they want the defense to be good. They trust their defensive coordinator. They've delegated that, responsibility and duty to him, and they're not worried about it. But Shanahan is going to continue to call the plays in San Francisco until that's no longer a thing for him. So if you're Bobby Slowick, you're probably never really going to get an opportunity to do that in San Francisco. So if you're looking to spread your wings, if you're hungry enough, here's an opportunity. Now you better make the best of it, because again, if the offense is status quo for where it's been the last 3 years, everybody's getting fired, including you. And then you go back to San Francisco, and you might not be the passing game coordinator. You might not be, in that position. You might be an offensive quality control assistant. Now you have to wait for an opening to come available before you can move back up. He's a name to watch. I don't think here in Washington necessarily, but that's still a name that should be boundied about. Here's where I think the list gets real. This is when now we're at nut cutting time. This is where I honestly believe these guys are in play for Washington to hire as their offensive coordinator. These 4 guys left on the list. Number 4, Mike McCoy. Currently the Jacksonville Jaguars quarterbacks coach. Largely responsible for the transformation of Trevor Lawrence from rookie F-up, leading the league in interceptions and turnovers, to 3-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio, leading his team to the playoffs in a home playoff game against the Chargers on Saturday night. Mike McCoy is getting a lot of credit, along with, of course, head coach Doug Peterson, getting a lot of credit for that turnaround in Trevor Lawrence, and he should. Mike McCoy's been a head coach in this league with the Los Angeles Chargers. I think they were then the San Diego Chargers. He's been an offensive coordinator in this league with the Denver Broncos and the Arizona Cardinals. I don't think he's a great offensive coordinator, right? I don't think that's his calling in this league, but he's a veteran. I think Ron and company are looking for someone who's done it before. I don't think they're looking for fresh blood. Okay, I don't think they're looking for this. They went that route already. They went with the guy that hadn't had real experience as a play caller, but they knew he knew ball, and so they wanted to give him an opportunity. I don't think they're going that route again. I think they're going to go with the veteran, cagey, wily, guy that's cut his teeth in this league already, been there, done that, and they're gonna get a retread, I think. And the reason I think you get a retread is because when you've had a taste of being a head coach in this league, you want that opportunity again if it didn't go well the first time. And the only way you're going to get that opportunity is if you can get back to the ranks of a coordinator. If you get fired as a head coach and you end up as a linebackers coach, you're not getting another opportunity to be a head coach. You're not going to be a quarterbacks coach and end up getting another head coaching job. You got to get back to being a coordinator, be widely successful for people to say, you know what, this guy deserves another opportunity. That's what happened with Todd Bowles, right? He wasn't getting another chance till Tampa had that dominant defense that shut down, Tom Brady, shut down Patrick Mahomes in that Super Bowl. And they said, hey, he's going to be the next head coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Leslie Frazier's name is starting to percolate a little bit. He's been around a little bit, but it's the job he's doing in Buffalo that's got people buzzing and saying, hey, maybe this guy needs another opportunity to prove he can be a head coach in this league. You're not going to get that as the linebackers coach or the running backs coach or the quarterbacks coach. if you've already had a chance. You can get an opportunity as a quarterback's coach or a running back's coach if you've never had a shot and people think you're really talented. But not if you've already had a chance and you failed. You're going to have to prove to them that you can still call plays and you can get it done, and guys will rally around you to get that opportunity again. A guy like Mike McCoy may never get another head coaching job. But if he wants a shot, he's going to have to be an offensive coordinator, and he's going to have to be willing to take the risk of a job where there's only 1 year for you to prove yourself in order to get a chance. Does he want to leave Jacksonville? He doesn't have to. Doug Peterson isn't going anywhere. If you're coaching Trevor Lawrence and he continues to ascend, you're going to get an opportunity somewhere. You really don't have to be gung-ho, jump the gun and go to Washington if you're Mike McCoy. You're probably going to get an offensive coordinator opportunity somewhere if Trevor Lawrence continues to improve. But we'll see. I think that's a name that they're going to be interested in. Number 3, Matt Nagy, Kansas City Chiefs quarterbacks coach. I've already mentioned him. He's a name that I think really should intrigue Washington because he's proven to be innovative, but he's also proven that he can call plays in this league. He did it in Kansas City, which is what got him the job as the coach of the Chicago Bears. He went to Chicago. He was outstanding as a play caller in his first year. Not so much the 2 years after that, after he got fired. Remember, I talked all kinds of shit about Matt Nagy, in Chicago. He was brainless as a head coach. Okay, he did not get it, but the guy can call plays. How many times have we said that about guys? Jay Gruden, not necessarily the best guy for the job as a head coach, but Jay can scheme some shit up. I feel the same way about Matt Nagy. Very creative, innovative, can maximize the talent that he has. Thought he did that his first year in Chicago with Mitchell Trubisky when they won the division. I think he's a guy that I just talked about, Mike McCoy, who's had opportunities to be an offensive coordinator and, has fizzled out in multiple stops. Matt Nagy hasn't gotten another opportunity since he got that offensive coordinator job in Kansas City, used that as a stepping stone to become the head coach of the Bears, and then got knocked from the ranks of being a head coach. He went back to Kansas City because that's normally what guys do. They go back to where they came from. If the same regime is there, if my guy is still employed, I'm going to get a job with him. I know I got a job in this league. But guess what? You're not going to just go back to Kansas City and get your old job back. You're not going to go back to Kansas City and be the offensive coordinator. Now you got to be the quarterback's coach. Now, he can wait in Kansas City, and I wouldn't blame him. At some point, Eric Bieniemy is going to get a job somewhere, whether it's a lateral move to be an offensive coordinator so he can spread his wings or a head coaching job. At some point, there will be an opportunity for upward mobility in that Kansas City Chiefs organization for Matt Nagy. So do you have to jump the gun and go to Washington on a potential one-off? I wouldn't if I were him. But if you're chomping at the bit that badly, and you don't look, we thought Eric Bieniemy was going to get a head coaching job 3 cycles ago. He still hasn't gotten a job. 3 cycles later, we're going into this cycle, and we're still not sure he's going to get a job. So at what point do you say, well, damn, how long am I going to have to wait for this guy to go? It's almost like a child, waiting for their parents' inheritance. And you're like, man, the old man's going to croak any day now, and I'm going to get all of this money that he's leaving me. And he just won't go. You thought he was going to die 4 years ago, that time where he got pneumonia. Nope, beat that shit. He's back like cook crack. You're like, oh, man, he fell down the steps, broke his hip. They had to give him surgery. You thought, man, this could be it. Nope, he's back. He's back around family and friends. And you're like, man, I don't know if this guy's ever going to go. At some point, some of those desperate ones, they get tired of waiting and they sort of help Pops along. At some point, he may get antsy and say, I don't know if he's ever gonna leave. So I'm just gonna take this leap of faith and go to Washington. I think Matt Nagy is a guy that makes a ton of sense for Washington. And I think he's someone that they might consider. These last two, I'm just going to tell you right now, I am not thrilled about either one of them. But this is the thinking that I feel like, and I can't say for sure. I don't know. There's nothing that exists out there that suggests that this is what's going to happen. But I'm trying to tap into the mind of Ron and Martin, and this is the kind of move that they make that doesn't please any of us, but this is what they want to do. Because if you're going to go out, you're going to go out on your terms. That's how this usually works. Is I'm going to go out with my shit, not yours, mine. So number 2 is Mike Shula, Buffalo Bills offensive senior assistant. You see that shit? What the hell is an offensive senior assistant? That screams to me, that's my boy. He's looking for work. He needs a gig. I'm going to make sure he's getting some bread. Put him on payroll. What the hell is an offensive senior assistant? I don't know, but you can create whatever title you want to give your boy a job. So Mike Shula was in Carolina with Ron Rivera in 2011 and 2012 as the quarterbacks coach. From there, Ron was impressed with him, so much so that he promoted him to offensive coordinator, where he stayed there from 2013 to 2017 until Ron didn't get fired, but that's when, changes had to start being made. Pressure was being applied. Okay. Hey, fix this or else. So you had to start firing guys like, their defensive coordinator. They had 2 straight defensive coordinators that got head coaching jobs. McDermott in Buffalo, and then Wilkes got one in Arizona. And then the next guy up was Washington, and he stunk it up. And they told Ron, either you fire him or you got to take over play calling, or all of y'all getting fired. Ron's like, all right, I got it. He told Washington, hey, you go back to being a linebackers coach or whatever. I got the play calling. No worries. It's all good. Same thing had to be done with Mike Shula. He got fired, essentially. Anyway, I digress. He's had experience with Ron before. Ron trusts him. Ron's looking for a guy that he knows philosophically is in line and lockstep with what he wants done. How often is it that we hear Ron reminisce about the Carolina days? I had a great 2-back system in Carolina. Good for you, Ron. That's great. We don't give a shit about what you did in Carolina. I care about what's going on here in Washington. Because last time I checked, you didn't have that many winning seasons in Carolina really to speak of. You had that 115-1 season. All right. So I really don't care to hear. And again, you had Cam Newton. Understand that. Cam Newton doesn't play here in Washington. So I really don't want to hear about what you did in Carolina. I just want to know how you're going to make this situation better. But keep in mind, Mike Shula is a guy that might be on their radar, and Mike Shula sucks. You ask any Carolina Panthers fan, they will tell you he was hot-ass garbage. This is the type of move that would literally be a lateral move for Washington if they hired Mike Shula. You literally would be going from Scott Turner to another guy that we would be bitching and complaining about every single week. I hope, I pray that Ronald and company do not bring us a retread like Mike Shula. I'm afraid that they will, though. Some kind of guy like that. Because that's their way of thinking. Rather be safe than sorry. You need an outside the box thinker to save your job, and they're going to go do the comfortable thing. Comfortable is what's going to ultimately get them fired. He did the uncomfortable thing, which was move on from Scott Turner. He did the uncomfortable thing, which was get rid of Sam Mills III. Will he be able to do it once again? The uncomfortable thing, go outside the box, outside of his comfort zone, and go get a guy that can actually save his job? Or is he going to do the comfortable thing, go get a guy that's going to come in here and acquiesce and do what he wants them to do and ultimately get him fired? We're going to see. Which leads us to number 1. Anthony Lynn, assistant head coach and running backs coach for the San Francisco 49ers. Anthony Lynn played in the same era as Ron Rivera and Martin Mayhew. Anthony Lynn was a former head coach in this league. Anthony Lynn is a former offensive coordinator in this league. Anthony Lynn believes in running the football. He is a running back by nature. That was his position in the NFL. He's a running backs coach through and through. He's been a running backs coach at like 4 or 5 different stops. He's a running backs coach right now as we speak in San Francisco. He's got the assistant head coaching title attached to his name, and thus I think you would have to give him something similar here in Washington if you were to pry him away from the 49ers, although offensive coordinator, I believe, is a step up enough from running backs coach, but I think you would probably have to also attach that assistant head coach label to that title, but that's nor here nor there. The bottom line is Anthony Lynn embodies everything that Ron Rivera and Martin Mayhew spoke about. Wanting to run the football, establishing an identity, and be physical. These are all the things that Anthony Lynn talked about as Chargers head coach. When he was a part of the Buffalo Bills rushing attack that led the league in rushing in 2015 and 16, when his name started to really, bubble on the surface of the NFL coaching landscape, he talked about physicality. He got to take over the play calling that year when Greg Roman was fired. And his message was, we're going to be physical. We're going to play mistake-free football. These sound like all the things that Ron Rivera is preaching, We'll take shots when shots are available. That old mindset, run it, throw it. I don't want Anthony Lynn anywhere near this team. Not as an offensive coordinator. As a running backs coach, hell yeah, come on, Anthony. You're more than welcome. But we got one of those already. Randy Jordan, I like him. I like him a lot. But these are the kinds of guys that I think they're going to be thinking about. Veterans who have done it in this league before, guys that they think they can trust. These are going to be some of the candidates that they're going to, think about. They tried to go out of the box with Scott Turner. They tried to go forward thinking. That didn't work. So now I think they're going to go back to what they think works. When Ron went 15-1 in 2015, Mike Shula was his offensive coordinator. I know Ron might look at the talent on this team and say, hey, I think Mike may be able to rekindle that magic. I hope not, but I have zero confidence in Martin Mayhew or Ron Rivera's ability to identify young, up-and-coming talent in the offensive coaching ranks. Thus, if you can't identify that, what's the next best thing? Go with what you know. I think that's what they're going to ultimately do, is go with what they know. They can't identify the next big thing as a coordinator. Hell, Ron had one right in front of him in Kevin O'Connell, and he jettisoned him for Scott Turner. We'll see what they decide to do. I am not confident. Neither should you. But we wait. And Ron and company have proven me wrong before. Many times. Okay. Let's hope they prove me wrong again by thinking outside of the box and getting us a guy that has a chance to come in here and be innovative, creative, and maximize the talent on this team. I won't hold my breath, but all we can do is wait and see. The good thing is, and I've said this already, the hard part is done, getting rid of Scott Turner. They did the hard part. Now the important part is, who are you going to replace him with? It's just as important as getting rid of Scott Turner, but that was hard. That was a buddy. You're friends with Norv Turner. You're firing his son. You just gave the man an extension last offseason and you gave him a vote of confidence. It's hard to then, after the following season after just giving him a 3-year extension to look him in the face and say, hey, thought we would be better. Thought you'd be better. Wasn't good enough. We're going to go in a different direction. Thank you for everything you've done. You can go. That's tough. It's a difficult thing to do. He did that. You ripped the Band-Aid off. Now, that's only half the equation. That loading bar is at 50%. Now you got to go and find a guy that can actually take this offense, take the talent that we feel like we have, and get this offense where it needs to be to give this team a fighting chance on a weekly basis. We'll see if Ron and company can do that or not. So, I digress. Let's get to social media maneuvers and where you guys stand in all of this, what you think is going to transpire, what your comments are. I look forward to hearing from you guys as always. And so we will jump into the comment section right now and get the party started. And we kick it off with Fee Yuck You. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, hey, Lou, Jay Gruden should get hired as OC. Change my mind. Whether or not it's possible is a different story. I told you, so here's my problem with Jay Gruden. If you recall, Jay Gruden's idea of running a football was duo up front. And it was the quick, almost like a fullback dive type of duo play, that never worked. That was Jay Gruden's idea of running the football. I hated Jay Gruden's rush offense. And if you recall, when Jay Gruden was here, our play action fake was non-existent. Why? Because Jay, he didn't marry the run game with the play action fake. That was one of the things Chris Cooley used to always harp on, is no one's falling for your play action fake because it doesn't look anything like the run game. So why would I fall for it as a defender? The point of a play action or a run action fake is that it looks exactly like the run. Thus, I need to go up and stop it. Oh my God, it's a pass. He pulled it back and he's going to throw it. They got me. If it looks nothing like the run, I'm thinking it's a pass. I wasn't a big fan of Jay Gruden's ability to run the football. I don't think Ron Rivera and company are a big fan of Jay Gruden's ability to run the football. Thus, I don't see him being a real candidate. But, we'll see. But I don't see that happen. I'd put that at the 1% that I put with Cliff Kingsbury, Jay Gruden. Again, when's the last time a guy that was the head coach of an organization went back to that organization as a assistant of some sort? When's the last time that's happened? If ever. I'm pretty sure it's happened before, but when? It doesn't happen very often. In order for something like that to happen, Jay Gruden would have to be boys with Ron Rivera, and I don't think they're boys. Video channel. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Who writes, Ron Rivera's 2-to-1 run ratio screams to me he wants to bring in a Greg Roman or Arthur Smith disciple. It could be. Again, Greg Roman is currently the offensive coordinator in Baltimore. Again, why would Greg Roman leave that situation in Baltimore when he's got a good thing going? When Lamar Jackson's healthy, he does a really good job of maximizing everything but the receiver position. But they're effective with the tight ends and the running backs and Lamar Jackson, and they win ball games. I don't see him leaving that to take a job where he could be fired after a year in Washington. But I've heard the name Greg Roman thrown out there. I just don't think, first of all, that's a lateral move. If I'm Greg Roman, if I'm the Ravens, I'm blocking you. One, their organization can't even stand Washington's organization. So I'm blocking you, number one. If I'm Greg Roman, I'm telling you, nah, I'm good. I don't even need the organization to step in and block you. I'll tell you myself, I'm not interested. Now, an Arthur Smith disciple could be interesting because they run the shit out of the football. We saw it firsthand against Atlanta. Is there anyone on that staff that Ron and company can identify as a guy that is ready to be an offensive coordinator? I can quickly look at that staff in Atlanta with the Falcons and see real quick if they have anybody on their staff that stands out right now. So I'm looking at their staff. Dave Rangone is the offensive coordinator. Charles London is the quarterback's coach. Running backs coach is Michael Petrie. TJ Yates, who's a former NFL quarterback, is the receivers coach. Justin Peel is the tight ends coach. Dwayne Ledford is the offensive line coach. I don't know, and Steve Jackson is a former defensive back in the league. I don't know if any of these guys necessarily, and again, I don't know if any of these guys necessarily move the needle per se and make them want to come, to this group and pull one of these guys away from the Falcons to be their offensive coordinator. And I don't think any of these guys that I just mentioned to you have play calling experience. And I don't think they're looking for a newbie personally. I think they're looking for a guy with play calling experience. And thus, I think they'll be scared away by any of the young. That's what I said. That would require out of the box thinking. AfroCat 2136. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, my candidates are number 1, Brian Hartline, which I had him on my list of honorable mentions. Number 2, Wes Welker. I think he is currently in San Francisco. Let me check right now. I think he's in San Francisco as the wide receivers coach, if I'm not mistaken. Nope. Leonard Hankerson is in San Francisco. Where the hell is Wes Welker at now? Let me see. I'm gonna find him. Matter of fact, I'm gonna just look him up. Save myself the time and anguish. Wes Welker. See where he is. I thought he was in San Francisco. He is the wide receiver coach in Miami right now. Let me see. Was he ever in San Francisco? Maybe I was tripping. Let's see. Yeah, he was with the San Francisco 49ers, and he went with Mike McDaniel when he took the job in Miami. Okay. All right. That makes sense. I'm like, damn, am I tripping? So you said Wes Welker. Okay. It's number 2. Chris Cooley, number 3. He says, played in the league, played in various offenses, ties to Shanahan or Belichick, or maybe would take this opportunity. Dark horses. I would love to have Chris Cooley be in, a coaching role. Hell, Chris Cooley was willing to take a tight ends coach role with the last regime. And for whatever reason, he never got that opportunity. And look, I get it. Just because you're knowledgeable, all of these guys know football, right? Like, you still have a pecking order that you have to go through. And Chris Cooley has made it abundantly clear. I'm not looking to be your offensive quality control assistant. I just want an opportunity, man. And if I can't get that, then I'm good. I love Chris Cooley's mind. I love how he sees the game. I can't say we see things the same because he knows more and has forgotten more football than I'll ever know. However, a lot of the things that I see on Sundays, and then, if I ever get a chance to listen to Kevin Sheehan's podcast and he's up there talking about, I'm saying the same shit, and I've already said it to you guys, and then he's saying it, and just a lot of the things that he sees makes so much sense. A lot of his philosophical beliefs make so much sense to me. I would love to see him get an opportunity, but it's not going to happen, because in order for him to get that opportunity, he'd have to be on someone's staff first as like a tight ends coach. And I think he would be willing to do that. But the way that you have to go about that, it's tough. There's a lot of sacrifice, and he's got young kids, and you understand that when you take on that role, you're going to miss a lot of things in life. You're going to make a lot of sacrifices. I don't know if he's willing to do that, but all of those names are ex-players, as you mentioned, and 2 of those 3 guys are, currently cutting their teeth in the profession and could easily get an opportunity somewhere. So we'll see. Video channel. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Video channel writes, Sherman Bingo Lewis, bingo caller. Back to Washington. But seriously, whoever takes this job is a gamble. I could see a Ken Wisenhunt type gunning for this gig. That's why I listed a lot of the names like Mike McCoy, Matt Nagy, Mike Shula. These are all guys, Anthony Lynn, all been head coaches in this league, or except for Mike Shula, all been head coaches in this league, all looking for another opportunity to at least be a play caller, which is a stepping stone to getting an opportunity to be a head guy. You're going to have to take a risk like this. If you feel like I'm not going to get that opportunity anywhere else, the rest of the league has pretty much shunned me, and this is the best I can do is Kansas City's Kansas City's quarterbacks coach, or Jacksonville's quarterbacks coach, or Buffalo's senior offensive assistant. If this is the best I can do, I might as well take a shot with Washington, even if I know that I could very well be fired next year. It's a risk I'm willing to take. Ken Wisenhunt is probably in that same discussion. King of the North, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, the situation around hiring a new OC is perfect, if you ask me. The new OC has to be confident/delusional enough to think he can get immediate results, because that's exactly what he will have to do. Yeah, facts, big facts. But again, that's that athletic arrogance that I referred to earlier, where you've got to have this aura about yourself that says, no, I can do this. I can totally go in there with those weapons. Are you kidding me? I'll have a field day with Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson and Curtis Samuel and De'Ami Brown and Logan Thomas and, Amani Rodgers and Cole Turner and Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson, and whether J.D. McKissick is back or not. I have a field day with all these weapons. Are you kidding me? That's what we need. We need a guy that is borderline delusional and thinks he's going to come in here and tear shit up. That's exactly what Ron needs. That's what we are looking for as fans. I'm not sure they're looking for the exact same thing, however. That's the frustrating part. King of the North, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Who writes, we don't need no hot commodity with a long-term plan looking for security. We need someone desperate to prove themselves and will make the most out of this one-year opportunity. Exactly, which is why my list looks the way that it does. You're looking for someone, and the last four guys on my list in particular are all desperate. Young guys aren't desperate. If you think you've got a bright future, you're not desperate enough to take a job that could be over in 1 year. Because if you're on a steady climb and then you jump out on a leap of faith and say, hey, this opportunity may be exactly what I need to fast track me to being a head coach, and you falter, now you go all the way back down the rung. Okay. You might have climbed all the way up to, to passing game coordinator in San Francisco if you're Bobby Slowick. You started out as offensive quality control, right? Then you were assistant offensive quality control. Then you were just offensive quality control. Then you were a quarterback coach assistant. Then you got to passing game coordinator. So you're working your way up that ladder. Next step for you, right, is quarterbacks coach, or it's offensive coordinator. You take this job, you fail, it's all the way back down to some made-up position, because you're not getting back to passing game coordinator in San Francisco. You might be the assistant passing game coordinator, but that's not your room. So, I don't know. I think desperation reeks of some of the older coaches who know this is my last opportunity to potentially get back to being an offensive coordinator, calling plays to show the rest of the league that I can do this, that I deserve another shot. I don't know if the young boys are as desperate, nor should they be. John Perez, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. My guy JP writes, Our new OC has to be a young guy who's creative and will get the most out of this offensive talent. Don't hire an old head with the stale philosophy. That's exactly what they're going to hire, I think. What we want and what they need are two different things. What we want is a young guy that can come in here and take the league by storm. What they're looking for is someone that is going to exist inside of the offense that they've created in their mind as to how we can be successful. They've already told you what they view as the blueprint to being successful. They've already told you that, and I don't have a problem. This is the thing. When you hear 2-to-1 run to pass ratio, that's egregious. And even them saying that is a farce. And ultimately, I don't think that's what it's going to be, right? 2-to-1 run to pass ratio. But that's their way of over exaggerating the fact that they feel like they need to run the football more than they pass it. Okay, that's fine. It doesn't have to be 2-to-1 though. But I mean, just think about this. 2-to-1 means your quarterback had 20 passing attempts and your run game at 40 rushing attempts. That's not sustainable nor feasible in this league in today's NFL. I told you when Taylor Heineke was here, I was perfectly fine. I said the same thing about Carson Wentz, frankly. I am perfectly fine with that quarterback having 23 to 27 attempts. That's the magic number, somewhere in there, right? I don't really want that quarterback creeping up to 30 or north of 30 attempts. That means we've probably done a little bit too much passing in the game. And if your quarterback has 24 attempts, if your quarterback is 18 of 24 for 265, one touchdown, no interceptions, and you run it in that game 37 times, are you complaining about 24 passing attempts, 37 rushing attempts? I'm not. Quarterback ran it 6 times. Brian Robinson ran it 18 times. And Antonio Gibson ran it 13 times. Are you complaining about that? I'm not. I'm fine with that. But we gotta understand what they view as successful for this team may not be what the offensive coordinator that they hire views as successful. And that's why you got to think they're going to get a guy that kind of aligns with the way that they think. And I don't think a young, outside the box, creative play caller fits in what Ron and company. They just did that in their minds. We just did that with Scott Turner. We did the young, creative, outside the box thinker. And this guy was running toss plays with the backup running back, the third string running back on 4th and 1. That's the outside the box. This clown was running gun runs with Curtis Samuel on 3rd and 3 or 3rd and 2 or 3rd and 1 instead of giving it to Brian Robinson. That's the outside of the box shit that got us in this position. I don't want that shit this time around. So that's kind of the thing that I'm banking on them thinking is we did that. It didn't work. Now we're going to do it the way we feel like we need to do it, which is going to ultimately get you a Mike McCoy. I don't care about Matt Nagy. I'd actually be okay with Matt Nagy. I think it's going to net you a Mike Shula or an Adam Lynn type of guy, which is scary. Christopher McLaughlin, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. My guy Chris writes, "Hey Lou, what's up, Chris?" Says, "Hope all is well for you and the fam. Likewise, everything is everything." He says, "How much more rope of red zone issues, predictable play calling, and high teen scoring, even with new OC before Coach Rivera loses the locker room for good?" I don't know if Ron will ever lose the locker room as long as he's here. He's going to continue to have the players back. He's going to continue to have a message that I think a lot of these players can get on board with. You saw where a lot of the venom from the players went when we heard from these players. We heard from Brian Robinson. We heard from Logan Thomas. We heard from Charles Leno. All of these guys weren't looking at Ron Rivera sideways. They were all looking at Scott Turner sideways. Terry McLaurin once complained about, play calling. Like, these guys aren't talking about Ron Rivera. They don't see him as the problem. They saw Scott Turner. If you look, I think one thing that a lot of you don't really understand is how these players view coaching and players in that locker room. Like, us as fans view it so differently. These guys, a lot of these players, not all of them, a lot of these players aren't at home watching the Bengals or the Chiefs play. Like, when they don't have to be watching film, they're not watching film at home. They're not taking this home and watching more of it. Some of them are, but most of these dudes, this is a job. Understand, a lot of you don't really see this as a job. You just see the product on Sunday, Monday, and Thursdays and say they need to be doing more. They need to be doing more. These guys work a job just like you and I do. They show up 6, 7 o'clock in the morning. They, stay until 4 or 5 o'clock in the evening. All right. And then they wake up and do it all over again. Monday through Saturday, and then they play on Sunday. Okay. It's a job. They film study, weight training, taking care of their bodies, all of this stuff, right? A lot of times, either you love football so much that when it's on, you're going to watch when you're at home, but you get a chance to get away. You game handing it up. You spending time with family. You ain't worried about watching what the Kansas City Chiefs are doing on offense. A lot of these guys in the locker room, they believe in the other players in the locker room. Like, they legitimately believe they can win with Taylor Heineke. We looking like we ain't winning shit with Taylor Heineke, man. Are you kidding me? Those players in the locker room, they really, seriously, like, yo, we can win with 4. There's some dudes that are realists like Benjamin St. Juice, who literally, and you don't get this, is why I love Juice, because Juice is candid. You don't get this from a lot of players. But Juice was like, look, man, with 4, I'll ride with him. Look, 4's going to make some throws and some mistakes that he's going to have you saying, what the F? But with the game on the line, I know 4 is going to go out there and get it and compete. And I can ride with that any day. All right? Which is how most of us felt. I can't say everybody felt that way, but that's how most of us felt. Look, he going to make some mistakes and he going to piss you off. But at the end of the day, game on the line, you get it to 4, he's going to make something happen. He's going to compete. A lot of those guys feel like they can win if you put a guy in there, we're going to rally behind this dude and we can win. Players thought they could win with Rex Grossman. Players thought they could win with Kirk Cousins. Not to say that you couldn't win with Kirk, but they rally behind these players. And they don't really see it the way that we see it. So they don't view Ron in the same light that we do, is what I'm essentially trying to express to you. We don't know Ron. They do. They see Ron every day almost. They look at Ron differently. So a lot of these players that were on the roster that were there in 2020, they saw Ron go through cancer. They saw Ron come to work when he wasn't feeling up to it. They saw Ron after chemotherapy sessions still show up and be out of it. But for the sake of being able to put up a united front and say to those players, hey, I'm here for y'all. All right, I believe in y'all and I'm going to be here no matter what. After you see that, you ain't quitting on Ron. You ain't turning on Ron if you were here in 2020. It's dudes that's still talking about watching Ron come to work, fighting and battling cancer. Some dudes they not bailing on Ron. When Ron got here, I think there was one dude that had something negative to say about Ron Rivera, and that was Steve Smith Sr. And he just didn't like the way that he left in Carolina, how he was pretty much pushed out the door because Ron wanted to turn the team over to Cam Newton, and Steve Smith Sr. was still too big of a personality in that locker room. It was more Dave Gettleman that felt that way, but Ron went along with it too. He was too big of a personality in that locker room, and in order to turn that team fully over to Cam Newton, they had to get rid of Steve Smith Sr. So he was pissed off about that. To a man, When Ron got here, we heard nothing but good things from all the players that used to play for Ron Rivera. And I guarantee you, when he leaves here, you're going to hear much of the same. So I don't see Ron losing this locker room. But who he hires as offensive coordinator is going to go a long way in determining whether he's here or not for the long haul. I think we can all agree on that. Let's see. Derek B. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, make Ron play 11. Blow it up. 2024 GM plus head coach plus cap plus top 10. You know, I entertained, this was a fleeting thought, but I entertained a very scary proposition. I don't think it's going to, first of all, I don't think it's going to occur because I think Frank Reich, and I said this is wherever I was asked this, I think I was asked this on Rio's show. I think I said this when somebody brought it up when we did the stream when Scott Turner was first relieved of his duties. I said, somebody brought up Frank Reich, and I said, he's still a head coaching candidate. The piece of that I didn't consider in that moment was something that I heard somewhere else. I can't remember if it was on Rio's stream that I was on, or if it was, reading something on socials, or somebody brought it up to me during one of my streams. Can't quite remember where I heard this, but I'm not gonna lie, I was like, oh shit, I didn't think about that. What if they kept 11? Which they're not. They're not. I said it was a fleeting thought. They're not. 11 is gone. Just like Scott Turner's gone, 11 is gone. What if they kept 11 and they went out and got Frank Reich, who still believes in 11 to this day? Brought him here to be the offensive coordinator and kept 11, and they decided to run it back next year. What if they did that? We would lose our shit. We would absolutely lose it. However, 11's gone. They're not going to pay him whatever, he would have to be paid if he's on the roster by the time of the start of the new league year. Frank Reich isn't looking for this type of job. This doesn't scream stability. This is instability. He doesn't want any parts of that. He just came from an unstable situation in Indy. He's not looking for another one here in Washington. And furthermore, I think Frank Reich is in contention for another head coaching job. So why would you take an offensive coordinator job? So again, all of that, doesn't exist. But I'll say this. The likelihood right now, if we were to put a percentage on it, the likelihood is it's more likely that Ron is fired next year and this whole thing is blown up with new ownership and we get a new GM, head coach, quarterback, all of that good stuff. That's more likely than Ron hiring an offensive coordinator, impressing the new ownership, being kept here or extended, because Ron would be going then into his 5th and final year of his contract if he were to have success. It's less likely Ron hires an offensive coordinator that knocks it out of the park. We win 11 games next year. We make the playoffs. We win a playoff game. The ownership group is saying, well, I'm cool with it if y'all cool with it. And we run it back. Sam Howell's the guy, whatever the case may be. That's very highly, not highly, that's unlikely at this point. It's more likely that Ron brings in an offensive coordinator, goes after a quarterback in free agency, doesn't get anybody worth a note, and settles on Sam Howell. Has mixed results next year. Howell shows flashes, but also shows the youthfulness of a young quarterback that is prone to making mistakes. And this team is a 7-8 win team again, and Ron gets fired. And then you get the new GM, new head coach, and possibly a new quarterback. That top 10, I'm just telling you right now, with the talent we have and with Ron Rivera's track record, you're not going to end up with the top 10 pick. As a head coach, I've said this enough times now to the point where I'm actually interested in looking at Ron Rivera's record. Let's look at Ron Rivera and his record as a head coach. Ron Ron 6-10, 7-9, 12-4, 7-8-1, 15-1, 6-10, 11-5, 7-9, 5-7. He was fired in Carolina. Here 7-9, 7-10, 8-1. Ron's never had a season where he's won less than 6 games when coaching the entire season. He was 5-7 when he was fired in Carolina in 2019. He would have won at least one more game down the stretch of that season had he not been fired. So what I'm telling you is Ron has never been bad enough to get you a top 10 pick, or one of these has probably been top 10. He's never been bad enough to get you a top 7 pick. One of these picks has probably been, 6-10, or he's 6-10 twice, 7-9 in 2018. I don't know where that puts you, but again, just think about our seasons at 7-9. We won a division, so that one doesn't count. But think about 7-10 last year. What were we picking? What did we pick in the first? 11. So 6-10 might get you, depending on that year, right? How many bad teams are ahead of you? That might get you the 8th or the 9th pick in the draft, but probably won't get you in the top 7. At the end of the day, that top 10 pick, I think he'll be on the outside of the top 10 personally. That's what I think, but we'll see. King of the North, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. My guy, King of the North, writes, the whole 2-to-1 run ratio has been overblown. They already reached out to reporters and said they didn't mean it. They just want to be a run-first team, which means a lot of play action, in my opinion. Say what you mean. I'm a big proponent of that. They sat there and they talked about 2-to-1 run-to-pass ratio for like 7 minutes. Don't tell me after the fact that you didn't mean that literally. You literally sat there and talked about it for 7 minutes. You sat there and preached to us how football's a physical sport and you got to be able to run it. And he wants to go back, and I played with a team with a 2-back system. And then in Detroit, I played with Barry Sanders. Hey, Ron, you played with Walter Payton. And they sat there and lectured us about teams who ran the football and how you have to be physical. And when Sam Howell started at the end of the season, they ran it 2-to-1, and that's what they want to be. Carson threw it too much early in the season. There was no Brian Robinson. When we got on that win streak, we ran the ball. Ron sat there and talked to us last offseason. I'm talking about this man was romanticizing about winning 2 games, 17-15 last season. On that 4-game win streak, he romanticized about the 17-15 victory over the Raiders and the 17-15 victory over the Seahawks. Don't tell me that they don't think that this is a philosophical belief. Now, again, was it overblown? Maybe it was overblown, but you did that. You perpetuated that narrative. You sat there and preached to us for 5 to 7 minutes about the importance of running the football, winning time of possession, and protecting your quarterback and keeping your defense off the field. They talked about these things. So don't then try to call the reporters and clean the shit up after the fact. You did that. You created that firestorm. They may not have meant it. And I've already said 2-to-1 is a bit much. I think it was a bit of an exaggeration. It's okay if you're 1-5, 1.5-1 run to pass. That's okay. I've given you an example. Sam Howell, 18 of 24, and we ran it 37 times. He ran it 6 times. Brian Robinson with 19 carries, and then Gibson with 12. Right? I can see that. Or Gibson with 9 and Curtis Samuel with 2 carries. Like, I can see that. There's nothing wrong with that. That's more like 1.5-1 in terms of run to pass ratio. I can see that, and that's okay. I'm on board with that. But 2-to-1 is a little bit much, and they sounded adamant about it. And that that was painful watching Sam Howell, on first down, hand it off, second down, hand it off, and then throw it on third down. That was painful. And yet he's getting giddy about that, was Martin Mayhew. So again, to your point, I do, and I've said this already, I do think that was a bit of exaggeration on their part, but don't put that out there. Don't allow that narrative to exist and then grow and then take on a life of its own, which is why they called the reporters to try to stop this, because it was starting to be overblown. But again, you did that. You set that thing in motion. So I don't feel bad for them. And I'm just going off of what you said. Christopher McLaughlin, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. My guy Chris writes, hey, Lou, what is the number one area that the new OC needs to fix immediately to make the offense more potent? For me, it's red zone efficiency. We were 51.1% in 2022 compared to the top teams being at 70%. You answered your own question. I've said this already about Scott Turner. You can say what you want about Scott Turner. You can talk about how terrible of a play caller he is, and you can talk about how he wasn't maximizing this team's talent. You can talk about his situational awareness. These are all things I've complained about for years, okay? But the one thing that I've been consistent in saying is that we've moved the football, no matter who's been at quarterback, whether it's Alex Smith, or it's Taylor Heineke, or it was Kyle Allen, or it's Sam Howell. We moved the football. Okay? Carson Wentz, you name it. Hell, even with Dwayne Haskins, at times we moved the football. So it's not about him not being able to draw up plays that allow you to go from 20 to 20. That really has never been the issue with Scott Turner. We don't always agree on how it's being done, but he gets it done. I told you, I've talked about this too many times to not know the answer to this. I feel like the Denver Broncos probably have kicked the most 20-yard field goals in the league. I want to know who's second, because I think we are. Number of field goals kicked by teams in NFL in 2022. Let's see. We're gonna find out something right now. 29 to 20. Let's see who has the most of these. So let's see. Joey Sly has 9 kicks of 29 or less. He's one of 3 kickers in football that kicked a kick of 19 yards or less, which means you pretty much got to like the 1 or 2 yard line and had to settle for a field goal. I mean, this shit is pathetic. Only 3 kickers in the league even attempted a kick inside of 20 yards. Sly was one of them. But the 20 to 29 yard field goal, he's actually not even close to the top of the list. I'm actually surprised. And you know what that also could be indicative of, and I have to take this into consideration, is he just didn't get enough opportunities, right? Like, he's 8 of 8 inside of 20 to 29 yards this season, and he's 4 of 5 from 30 to 39, okay, this season. So really the 20 of 29 is where my brain is at. Like, that's the failure inside the red zone. Robbie Gould in San Francisco is 13 of 14. The Ravens kicker Justin Tucker is 13 of 13. Mason Crosby in Green Bay, 10 of 10. Greg Joseph in Minnesota is 10 of 10. Ryan Suckup for the Bucks is 10 of 11. Daniel Carlson of the Raiders is 9 of 9. Nick Folk for the Patriots, 9 of 9. Matt Gay for the Rams, 9 of 9. So you see where I'm going with this. But what I'm saying is these teams probably had more possessions. We were the best time of possession team in the league, which is a great stat, but it also means that you're shortening the game and there are less possessions, if that makes sense. So if you go on we literally had a 21 play, 96 yard, 11 minute and 26 second drive against the Browns. That's almost a full quarter that you had the ball, one possession. So I think in looking at that stat, those teams, Baltimore and San Francisco and some of the other teams, I think they had more possessions than we did, which is why our number isn't as high. I'd like to see how many possessions those teams had versus how many we had. It might not even be that big of a discrepancy, but to my initial point, we kicked a lot of field goals and we missed a lot of opportunities. We also went for it a lot on fourth down, and whether we got it or not remains to be seen. But there are a lot of missteps in the red zone. We moved the football. That's been my biggest takeaway. And the thing that I've told you is we moved the ball. We just didn't always maximize the opportunities. There weren't a lot of red zone trips in some games, and other games there were red zone trips, but I don't know. We can look right now. I'm going to look right now because I'm actually curious. In any game, was there ever a game this season? And I pretty much can answer it because I don't know if there were many games where we scored 3 touchdowns in them. Let's be honest with ourselves. We might have had 3 games this season where we scored 3 touchdowns or more. The week 1 game against Jacksonville, we scored 4 touchdowns. The week 2 game against Detroit, we scored 4 touchdowns again, if I'm not mistaken. And the week number 10 game against Philadelphia, we scored 3 touchdowns in that game. I'm not sure we scored 3 touchdowns in any other game this season. Did we score 3 against San Francisco? I'm not sure if we did or not. We scored 20 points, though. So that easily could have been a missed extra point, right? We'll see. We're going to see right now. I'm going to look it up right now and put this to rest in my head. So we'll start with, we know week 1. I'm just anxious. I'm curious to see what we did in the red zone, though. Red zone in that game, we were 2 of 2 against the Jacksonville Jaguars. We started out the season really good in the red zone, by the way. I remember saying that after the first 2 weeks of the season. Against Detroit, we were 3 of 3 in the red zone. So we're 5 of 5. Now shit's about to go downhill after that game. I remember getting into the red zone against the Eagles in week 3 twice. We scored once, and then remember Daron Payne got the safety. Why did he get a safety? Because we failed on one of those fourth downs down in the red zone inside the 1 or 2 yard line. We were 1 of 3 against Philadelphia in the red zone. As bad as that game was, and I remember it, we had our chances in the second half. We just stunk it up. We were terrible that game anyway. Against Dallas in week 4, 1 of 3 again. So you went from 5 of 5 in the first 2 weeks to now 2 of 6 the following 2 weeks, and it's only going to continue to get worse here. Titans game. This was the backbreaker because we got all the way to the 2 yard line on a Terry pass interference, and we couldn't get in. We were 0 of 1. That was our only trip. Remember, that was the 2 De'Ami Brown bombs. That's how we scored our 2 touchdowns. So we only got the red zone 1 time in that game, and we failed in that game. So now since a 5 of 5 start, we're now 2 of 7 in the red zone. Now we move on to week number 6 against Chicago. This probably isn't going to be much better. 1 of 2, right? So now you're 3. I'm gonna keep a running tally of this. We started 5 of 5 in weeks 1 and 2. Weeks 3 through 6, we were 3 of 8. Now We head to Green Bay for week 7. 1 of 4 against the Packers. Are you kidding me? 1 of 4 against the Packers? So you're 1 of 4 in week 7 against Green Bay. I mean, that's ridiculous. Against the Colts, probably like 1 or 2 in this game, I would guess. 2 of 3, not bad. So you were 1 of 4 against Green Bay. So in week 7 and 8, you were 1 of 4, and then you were 2 of 3. So that's 3 of 7. All right. So now, Vikings game. This one sucks. You were 1 of 1. Look at that. That's the Dak Milne touchdown. So we only got into the red zone once in that game. Eagles game. We probably were something like 2 of 4 in the red zone in this game because we kicked some field goals. 2 of 3. I remember the one possession we didn't score on. When we watched the film, Heineke could have gotten it to Antonio Gibson immediately. I think he would have scored. There were opportunities there. He missed it. But 2 of 3 isn't bad. So 1 of 1 and 2 of 3 in weeks 9 and 10. So 2 of 3, 1 of 1 gets you 3 of 4. All right. And Texans game, we kicked a lot of field goals in this game. This game was frustrating. I remember leaving this game thinking we should have scored 30-something on these boys. 1 of 4 in this game. That was one of the worst games. I didn't realize the Packers game was so bad. 1 of 4. But I knew the Texans game was bad. Falcons game, I don't think we had many opportunities in this game. 2 of 3. We weren't bad in that game. I didn't think that was a bad game. So weeks 11 and 12, let's go to 11 and 13. So because we're about to hit this bye week here shortly. So we'll go 11 through 13. So right now, you're 2 of 3 against the Falcons. You were 1 of 4. So that puts you at 3 of 7 going into the Giants game. First Giants game. I don't think we had too many red zone trips. 1 of 2. So you were 3 of 7. So that puts you at 4 of 9, weeks 11 through 13. So now we come after the bye week and the final stretch. We're going to put all of these games together, weeks 15 through 18. Giants start with that second Giants game, and this is bad because we got down there at the end of the game and we couldn't get it in. We were 1 of 3. Okay, which is why you lose that game. San Francisco game, I think we were actually pretty good in the red zone in this game. I'm going to guess we were either 2 of 2 or 2 of 3. 2 of 3. All right. So you were 1 of 3 against the Giants. You were 2 of 3 against the 49ers. So you're 3 of 6. You go to the Browns game. I think we only had 1 trip into the red zone, honestly speaking. Maybe two, because that's how we got 10. So we probably were 1 of 2, 1 of 3, or 1 of 1. Yep, that 1 trip with Carson Wentz jumping over. So we were 1 of 1 in that game. So you're now 4 of 7. And you finish up the season against Dallas, and we kicked a bunch of field goals in this game. And you had a pick. 2 of 6. My goodness, that is atrocious. So we were actually pretty good, 4 of 7, and then you go to 6 of 13 in the final 4 weeks of the season. So you started out 5 of 5, and then you finished up 3, 6, 9, 13, 6, so 19 of 8, 15, 19, 28, 41. And so you started 5 of 5 on the season, and you ended up 19 of 41 after that. So let's do the number crunching here. 24 of 46 is 52%. So you had 51.1. I ended up with 52. It's roughly the same. We were terrible in the red zone. That's what that equates to. That's losing football. That's the number one thing that needs to be cleaned up. I think it's 1A, 1B, because we were terrible on third downs this season. I don't even need to go through that. We've done that enough here. We were horrible. There was a stretch of games. I think it was the Eagles game all the way until the Bears game, that Packers game, right? So it was from weeks 3 to 6 where I don't think we converted more than 2 or 3 third downs out of like 11 or 12 every single week. I'm going to look because I know we were 2 of 12 against Chicago, I think, and 2 of 11 against the Titans. I could be wrong about that. Let's just see. My memory is pretty damn good. So I know it's something along those lines. We were 6 of 17 against the Eagles. I think it starts here with the Cowboys. I actually feel like we converted against the Cowboys. Hold on a second. 5 of 15. That's not terrible. It's not great either. Titans game, I know we were 2 of 11 or 1 of 11, something like that. 1 of 11 against the Titans. I think we were 2 of 12 against the Bears. Let me see. 2 of 11 against the Bears. And then we were pretty good against the Packers on third down. 7 of 16. The Colts game, we were pretty bad, I think, again on third down because we had to go for it on fourth down a bunch. 2 of 12. Like, that's the shit right there that bothers me. Third downs. So red zone, third downs, 1A, 1B. You can't get into the red zone a bunch if you're not converting third downs because drives stop unless you're going for it on fourth down and converting. But if you want to be a better offense, you need to be better on third downs. If you want to be better on third downs, you need to be more efficient on early downs. See where I'm going with this? So there's a number of things to clean up. More efficient on early downs equals better success on third downs. Better success on third downs equals more trips potentially to the red zone where we need to be better. There's a lot here that we need to clean up. All right. Alex Kurz, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. My guy Alex writes, that 2-to-1 statement is just nonsensical. That ratio per drive, per game, per season overall, it doesn't work like that. Scenarios and matchups dictate throw, and that's how you win. Run helps, but saying identity is 2-to-1 can't help. That's why it didn't make sense to even make that statement. Like, the fact that they had to come out and talk to reporters and kind of put a muzzle on that speaks to their negligence. That for as many times as they talked about having to assess, the staff and, I forgot the word that they kept using over and over again. But the fact that they avoided answering so many questions and then they went as far as to be so descriptive in particular about what they were looking for, which is why I mentioned it when I gave you my talking points on the last episode of CNN. And I talked about philosophical beliefs. I'm like, that's ridiculous. And to your point, nonsensical. Like, each game is an entity onto its own. Each team is better at doing this than that. You may go up against a team where they just don't give it up on the ground. So instead of banging your head against a brick wall, you should just spread them out and throw it that week. And then there's some teams where they just can't stop the run. Well, then you should feed them runs until they're throwing up and burping run plays. And then there's some teams where you just go in and you say, hey, this is a balanced team, so we're just going to attack them the best way we think we can. And whatever kind of works in the game, we're going to stick with that. Like, I'm with you, Alex. It just doesn't make a ton of sense to me. Donnie Dragon, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Donnie writes, what up, Louie? Seeing you streaming, wanted to stop by and show some love. Good luck, even though you praying on our downfall regardless. Go Birds. Hey, I appreciate you, Dottie Dragon, man. Thanks for the love. And of course, I'm praying on your downfall, but nonetheless, we still family either way. You know, you still a member of the NFC East. So it's all love, even though I would love nothing more than to watch your demise in the playoffs. But you know what it is. Much respect. Let's see. The Great Watubi, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, thanks for the great content this season, Lou. Thank you for supporting and being here for pretty much all of the content this year, the Great Watubi. And I appreciate all of you who have been out here supporting the Louie T Network this entire time. So it was a great season, as I mentioned. Sad that we're not, like the rest of the division, preparing for a playoff game and getting ready for that. But it could be worse. Scott Turner could still be the offensive coordinator here. We could not be preparing for a sale of the franchise and Daniel Snyder being out of our lives forever. It could be worse. Mark Mullinex, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, hey, Brother Lou, what do you think about Joe Brady? He worked under Sean Payton. Did you not see what happened when Joe Brady got an opportunity to be offensive coordinator in Carolina under Matt Rule? Did you just blank on that and forget about that, Mark? He was horrible. He got fired. All right. As the offensive coordinator. Teddy Bridgewater left Carolina after the first year of Joe Brady and said, I don't even know what they're doing. We don't even have a red zone period. They're clueless. No, I don't want Joe Brady. And I actually think Joe Brady is a smart football mind. We saw what he did at LSU with Joe Burrow, but that's college. This is NFL, and I'm not sure he's ready for that opportunity quite yet. He got it. He wasn't good. Now he has to prove that he gets it. I don't think he does yet. It's too early. All right. Fee Yuck You. Thank you for the super chat. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Who writes, Lou, I love my job, but tell me why they always want to throw me more work on my routes, because the route next to mine has a lazy driver. Shaking my head. I hate it, man. I was always a big proponent of when you show that you can do more, they give you more, and they don't always give you more pay. So when they were trying to train people to learn this software or to be able to drive this kind of machinery or to be able to do this, I was always like, I'm good. Unless you're going to pay me for this, I'm good. Because if you know I'm capable, you know what you're going to start doing? Adding to my workload. Are you going to pay me more money for adding to my workload? A lot of the time, the answer is no. So because of that, I like to just do my job. I don't want to do anybody else's job. But if they see that you're capable, if they know, hey, my guy's going to take care of business, and if that guy isn't, I can give it to my other guy because he's going to pick up the slack, they're going to put that on your tab. So it is what it is. That's how it is sometimes. But you got to let them, you got to speak up and let them know sometimes. And again, I'm not telling you to speak up and potentially lose your job or anything like that, but sometimes you got to let them know. This is sure an awful lot of work here. Seems like something I should be getting paid for. Most people don't speak up though, for fear of losing their jobs. Fee Yaku writes, Ron is bad at decision making in general, but do we have a more youthful talent than when he first took over? Jay got shafted by Brucey, in my opinion. Do we have more youthful talent than when he first took over? Ron, of course. Need I remind you what this roster looked like when Ron first got here? I mean, are you serious? Do you not remember what 2020 looked like? The running joke is we had Dontrell Inman, Isaiah Wright, and Steven Sims Jr. at wide receiver to go along with Terry McLaurin. Surely you didn't forget about that. As much as I love Peyton Barber was our short yardage back. But remember, when they couldn't get anything out of Antonio Gibson, or, he was banged up, they would go to Peyton Barber, and Barber would have like 13 carries for 27 yards. Like, understand what this roster was. There was Logan Thomas at tight end and nothing else. Defensively, we were starting to build. I actually think that was one of our better defensive groups that first year. You had a rookie Cam Curl. You had Kendall Fuller at one corner. You had Ronald Darby at the other corner, which he was outstanding in that year. Linebacker position still left a lot to be desired, obviously, but the defensive line was playing really well. You still had Ioannidis and Settle and Allen, Payne, Sweat. Young was a rookie and tearing it up. So the defense was okay. It wasn't great. Linebacker was still a big problem. Safety wasn't great that year, but it was serviceable, but it wasn't great that year. Neither was corner, for that matter, but we got by because we got pressure on teams. And we played some bad quarterbacks, let's be honest. We're light years ahead of where we were talent-wise. It's not even close. I've already said this numerous times. You can say what you want about Ron and company, but you do have to give them credit for acquiring more talent, whether it be via free agency with Curtis Samuel or the draft, with Jahan Dotson and Derek Forrest, Benjamin St. Juice. I still believe in Sam Cosmi. Jamin Davis has proven himself to be a worthy linebacker, and I think he's still scratching the surface, to be honest with you. So they've upgraded the roster from a talent perspective. They still got more work to do, but this thing is light years ahead of where it was, once before. So, yeah. DJ, 23. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, "What's up, Lou? Next season," what's up, DJ? "Next season, they should just build up the O-line and let Sam get a chance to see if he can be the future. And if not, worst case, we get a top pick and get the guy." Easier said than done. I mean, because theoretically, you could have said the same thing about Carson Wentz this year. Hey, just give Carson Wentz a chance. If he sucks, guess what? We'll get a top draft pick. Well, Carson Wentz sucked. He got hurt. Taylor Heineke came in. He won some ball games, and we ended up at 16. Sam Howell plays next year. He's not good. He sucks. They bench him, or he gets better as the season goes on. Either way, you end up winning 7 games, and you end up with the 11th or 12th pick in the draft. Not necessarily a top pick, right? Pretty much in that same, area. They go out, they sign Jacoby Brissett. Howell stinks, or Howell gets injured. They put in Jacoby Brissett, and he wins you 3 games. Howell comes back to mixed results again. He had won 2 games before he got hurt, comes back, wins you another 2 games, and he got 7 wins on the season. Again, in order to get a top draft pick, you have to be as bad as we were in 2019. This roster is not the 2019 roster that Dre Gruden went into the season with Case Keenum as his quarterback, Terry McLaurin as a rookie, as the best receiver we had on the team, and really nothing to speak of in the backfield at running back. tight end, any of that. Vernon Davis was the only tight end that we had that season. He got hurt relatively early, and that was one of the worst assemblance of talents I've ever seen as a Washington fan. I've seen some teams that were void of talent in my time as a fan. You go into some of those 90s teams after free agency hit, Joe Gibbs 1.0 was over, and God bless him at the time, but Charlie Casserly was trying to keep this thing together with Bazooka Joe gum, duct tape, rubber bands, paper clips, thumbtacks. The shit was absurd. There was a lot of bad draft picks in there. Free agency did not go well for us. We were in salary cap hell. I saw some bad rosters. There were a lot of bad teams in the mid to late. The mid 90s was brutal. In 94 and 95, and we started out like gangbusters in 96, and then that season fizzled. We went back to being pretty much ass, but at least there was Gus Farad in 97. You could see maybe a semblance of something in 98 with Trent Green. 99, you end up with Brad Johnson, and the rest is history. But there were some bad teams, man. That 2019 team trumped all of them. You remember the John Beck year, Rex Grossman years. Like that first year of Shanahan in 2010. Are you kidding me? Ryan Terrain was our running back. There were some bad teams, man. 2019 takes the cake. So I don't think we'll ever be that bad again, man. Just to be honest with you, it's not as simple as just play Sam. If he's not good, we get a top draft pick. It usually doesn't work out that way. You've got to be Houston Texans, Chicago Bears bad. We're not that. King of the North, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. King of the North writes, we don't have receivers that can run block or enough blocking tight ends to be like Philly, San Francisco, Baltimore, etc. You have to mold the scheme to the talent you have. Maybe they go after blocking tight ends in the offseason. I don't know if they really want to morph into one of those teams or not. I think the tight ends that we have and how they utilize them as blockers was fine. I'm not a big get out on the edge guy and ask my tight ends to have to seal the edge consistently in the run game. You can ask them to do that sometimes, but you don't want to consistently ask them to have to do that. Why? Because you're going to end up with a holding penalty at some point. Same with your receivers. I actually think our receivers do a pretty damn good job of blocking down the field and not getting holding penalties. I don't think we had too many of those this season on our receivers. We've had them clearly on the tight ends. But I liked them. That was one of the few things I liked that Scott did was he took the tight ends and he had them on the move constantly. So they weren't just being asked a lot of times to just stand and stock block, block somebody in line as a Y. A lot of times those guys were in motion or they were pulling and countering, and they were wham blocking or coming across the formation and leading into the hole. And you don't have to be a great blocker to do that. You just got to be able to put a body on a body. And Amani Rogers was allowed to do that, and Cole Turner was allowed to do that, and Logan Thomas did that, and Bates did it well. And so I think I would like to see them have some semblance of that. If you're going to be a dedicated run team, to your point, you're going to have to, specifically at tight end, you're going to have some dogs in the run game that absolute maulers as run blockers, because the tight ends are essential if you're going to have success as a rushing team. The receivers, that's how you get big runs. You don't have to have great blocking receivers to have, modest to above average success consistently in the run game. But in order to have those big runs, the 50, 60, 70-yard runs, you got to have guys with either angle breaking speed, ability to make people miss in space, or you got to have some big time blocking down the field by your receivers, or all of the above. John Perez, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. My guy JP writes, I'm open to Howell starting in 2023, but it would be foolish to not at least inquire about trading up for Stroud, the one QB this offseason I want. Again, you can call the Bears at number 1 if you'd like. It's going to cost you an ass ton. If I'm Ron and company, what do I care? I'm not going to be here after this season if this kid doesn't come in and kill it anyway. I'm probably going to get fired anyway. What do I give a shit about you not having your draft picks in the first round for the next 2 years? I don't give a shit. This is why you can't let Ron. If I'm ownership, I would say you aren't allowed to get a quarterback, dude. Make Sam Howell work. Build around that kid. Because I'm telling you right now, I'd do exactly what the Bears did. You know, you had a lame duck coach in Matt Nagy and a lame duck GM in Ryan Pace going into that 2021 draft, and they said, F it, we ain't going to be here. Who gives a shit if we trade away first-round picks to go up and get Fields? The only hope we have is this young kid comes in here and we're able to coach him up just enough so that they say, hey, you did a good job with him. I'd like to see a full season of it with him starting. That's your only hope. Or he comes in, he shows you that he can be the starter day one, which he didn't in Chicago. They didn't go to him right away. But he shows you right away he can start, and you're able to kill it with him as a rookie. But as far as you're concerned, what do I give a shit if I give away future first-round picks? I ain't going to be here to feel the effects of that. That's your problem, not mine. My job, which is why Jay Gruden wanted no parts of Dwayne Haskins, because he's like, bro, my job's on the line. What the hell do I want with the first-round quarterback that isn't ready to play? If you're going to make me take a quarterback, at least give me a guy that I think is going to be ready to come in here and help right away. This guy isn't even good enough to beat out Case Keenum. What am I supposed to do with that? I need players that can help me win right now. I'm trying to save my job. If Ron and company are, absolutely floored by, CJ Stroud's ability and they just got to have him, okay, go get him. If I'm them, what do I give a shit? If I really think this guy is that good and it doesn't work out for me, it's the next guy's problem, not mine. So this is why I'm a huge proponent of not letting Ron and company choose the next quarterback, because they could go out and trade for Derek Carr and Derek Carr could be asked. I've already laid out the numbers. I don't know if you watched the podcast today, but I had a chance to take a look at the numbers of what it's going to take, essentially from a financial standpoint, to eat Derek Carr's contract for the next 3 years, which is what you're going to have to do. There's no exit ramp the next 3 years. He's $33 million this year on the cap, and it's a dead cap hit. So that's base salary. You try to get rid of him, you're eating $33 million this year. You're eating $42 million in 2024. And that's base salary. That's dead cap money. You can't do anything with it. And the following year after that, in 2025, it's $43 million of dead cap money. You're saddled with over $130 million if you invest in Derek Carr over the next 3 seasons. If that's what you want to do, I think it's more like $120 million. But if that's what you want to do, if that's what you're into, knock yourself out. I want no parts of that. But if I'm Ron, I don't give a shit about the cap 2 years, 3 years from now. I might not be here. If he's really good, we'll take it on the chin. Remember what Ron said? Remember what Ron said when we talked about the price for Matthew Stafford and the price that the Rams paid, and Ron said, who cares? They won the Super Bowl. Do you care? And people are like, actually, yeah, we do care, Ron, about what you're paying for Matthew Stafford. Yeah, we do care. Rams are still paying. They suck ass. Sean McVay may quit on them. Yep, it's worth it. You got the Super Bowl. Nobody's denying that. But there's still long-term ramifications. that stem from that trade. And all the other trades that you've made where you don't have a first round pick until like 2027. Yeah, the shit does matter. So it's kind of why I'm like, yeah, I don't really know if you want Ron doing that. Because if I were in his position, I'm like Martin, say we go after CJ Stroud. And this is what the Bears want. And we give him what they're asking for. And he doesn't work. What's the penalty to us? And Martin's like, nothing. It's the next guy's problem. Well, shit, why not do it then, right? Martin's like, yeah, right. Why not? With no ownership there to stop them and Ron being in control right now, what's stopping them from making a move like that? I don't know. Stop asking. King of the North, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. My guy, King of the North, writes, how impressed me, but the knock on him is he's a one read and run if that's not open style of quarterback. That can be an asset behind a bad line, but he still has to show he can go through progressions. What's crazy is I actually didn't see that from him on tape. He was actually the opposite. I actually saw a guy that stood in there and did go through progressions. Now, he did take off and run, but if you listen to Phil Longo, his offensive coordinator, and like I told you, I had listened to this a year ago, this time last year when, so May of last year, sometime around there when he had the interview with John Time. And he said, we lost 2,000-yard receivers, De'Ami Brown, obviously, and the other one went to Chicago. I don't know why I'm blanking on his name. And they lost two, 1,000-yard rushers in Javonte Williams and Michael Carter. And he said, essentially, they replaced one of those rushers with a transfer from Tennessee. And they said, hey, Sam, we need you to be the other 1,000-yard rusher, bro. And Sam ran for 8 and some change. But in college football, it's weird. They subtract your sack yardage from your rushing totals. And so in the NFL, they're just sack yards. In college football, they subtract it from your rush yards. So he actually rushed for over 1,100 yards, but because of the sack yardage, it was like minus 200 and something. And so it brought it down to 8 and some change. So Sam Howell essentially rushed for 1,000 yards, over 1,100 yards in his last year at UNC. So you can get that from him, in that regard, when he was running. He ran so often that you say, oh, he's just tucking in and running. He doesn't like what he sees. He's tucking in and running. But they had offensive line issues that year, too. They lost a lot of offensive linemen. And Phil Longo had talked about they lost their center and the line kind of fell apart. And so he had to run for his life. There was a lot going on that last year at UNC that he had to deal with. But I didn't, when I watched him, I didn't see a one read and go guy. And I remember the knock on Deshaun Watson, which is why he wasn't a top pick coming out of Clemson, was because he was a one read and run type of quarterback at Clemson. And look what he developed into. And I remember the one thing that Phil Longo said to me that stuck out in that interview with John Conley. He's like, yo, this dude loves football. He's a gym rat. He's a guy that watches and studies a lot of film. He's not a rah-rah guy. Right? He's not one of these Tom Brady types who's going to get in your face, be yelling at the top of his lungs or any of that stuff. But he's like, this dude watches a ton of film and he wants to be great. And he said, I think he's going to have a 30 for 30 one day about how he ended up being a 5th-round pick, similar to Tom Brady, right? Ended up falling this far in the draft and ended up being a great quarterback in the league. And how did that happen? And so, I don't know. We'll see. I think he is better than just. And look, his first start, it was a lot of, hey man, go through your progressions quickly. If you don't like what you see, go. It was similar to what they told Robert Griffin III in his rookie season. You're the check down. Go through your progressions. You don't like what you see, run. You're the check down. That's sort of like what I saw from Sam in the game. But I thought he was trying to go through his progressions, so I think he'll be all right. Door Gunner, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. My guy Door Gunner writes, fire Super Friend stream last night, like always. Thanks for another great year of content. Opening day is going to be lit after Dan is gone. It could be crazy. I think they could make it crazier by scheduling a big time opponent in that first home game for Washington without Daniel Snyder. If they're smart, if they get it in the league office, and they understand what his departure could mean for the revival of this fan base. You got to schedule that first game as an NFC East opponent or somebody big time on. I would. That's how I would do it, but we'll see. Last night's Super Friends stream was one of my favorites. It was one of my favorites. I thought that one was actually really hilarious, and it was a lot of good moments, and it was a lot of craziness, and I enjoyed that one thoroughly. That was a lot of fun. Thank you for the support, as always, Door Gunner. Donnie Dragon, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Actually, LT Rufior, a real one. He needs a mod ASAP. No fear. I don't even think this is the same Donnie Dragon from earlier. That's a different thumbnail, unless he changed his thumbnail that quick. I don't know. I might be tripping. No worries. We just gonna keep it pushing. Anyway, I digress. So that was the last comment. I'm gonna tell you right now. I wonder, one of the things I wonder before we get out of here is how long it's going to take them to find the next OC. Like, what's the time frame that they're working with? Do they want to wait until the playoffs are over so that some of these playoff teams with, young candidates that they may be interested in, or a team like Kansas City with the quarterbacks coach that they may be interested in, or anything like that? I'm just throwing out random, scenarios. I wonder if they're going to wait to make the decision, or if they really want to get that guy in the building as fast as possible, get him watching tape and kind of formulate a plan going into next season, have that guy break down Sam Howell and see if that's something that they'd be interested in doing instead of going out. Like, I truly believe they shouldn't be in on guys like Jimmy Garoppolo, especially Derek Carr, with the numbers that it's going to take to get him here from a financial obligation standpoint. But Jimmy Garoppolo probably cost you a lot less. And I don't want to do that. But we know that they were in on Jimmy Garoppolo last year. So they worry me. I think they're going to do something foolish. There's a discussion to be had about Heineke. I was going to have it tonight, but obviously the firing of Scott Turner kind of pushed that back a bit. We can do that next week. It's no big deal, or whenever I so choose. We got plenty of time. It's the off season, damn it. We got plenty of time to talk about all this shit: draft, free agency, all of this stuff. We got none but time, man. So we'll knock it out. But anyway, I digress. That's gonna do it for me, your man Louie T, here on the season finale of Commanders Nightly News. It's been a blast doing this with you guys pretty much every single day, Monday through Friday, for the last 19 weeks. But we've met our destination. Unfortunately, it was not the postseason, but we'll do this again next year. And now we will get into the command post, and that will take over. But as you know, that's not a nightly program. It's once a week live, and whenever the spirit hits me. So things will be a little bit less consistent, but I ain't going nowhere. So if anything hits my mind, I got an idea for a show or something I want to talk about, you'll see this face all up in your space. But for the meantime, it's playoff ball time. And I do this every year with you guys, and I'm going to do it again. and I'm going to challenge you. I know a lot of you are just Commanders fans and you don't care about any other team. I challenge you to go watch playoff ball. And some of y'all, I know y'all are football fiends just like me, so I don't have to tell you this. You're watching the other games. You don't need me to implore you to do that. But for the rest of you who are just Commanders fans and don't care about the rest of the league, watch playoff football so that you get a sense of what the game is missing here in Washington. Every year, I ask you guys to do that, and then I say, hey, tell me what you saw. What is the thing that stood out to you the most? I remember last year, I talked about, I think it was 2 years ago, I asked you guys, and I remember specifically talking about explosive plays. We don't get explosive plays, you know, and I'm seeing these teams in the playoffs just explosive plays all over the place. What are some of the big takeaways from the playoff teams that you see that they're doing that we're not doing? Outside of the obvious. I'd like to hear from you guys. Anyway, that's going to do it for me, your man, Louie T. No content from me tomorrow. I'll be taking the day off, but we'll be back on Saturday. Wild card weekend in full effect. Back on Sunday after that. Back on Monday for the Cowboys Buccaneers wrap up. Should be a lot of fun. Bart Scott. Can't wait. Until then, I'll see you guys next time. Last time for the season. Signing off. Commanders Nightly News. I'm your man, Louie T. And I am out.
Here comes the diesel. Here comes the diesel. There's the snap. Hand to Riggins. Good hole. He's got the first down to the 40. He's gone. The 35, the 30, the 20.